Xbox, games, and things you might want to know. Let's get into it. What is happening, guys? Dealer back again with yet another video talking about the Xbox Series S. Microsoft have officially spoken on what type of backwards compatible games it will run and more. We've also got some information on if the system will actually hold back your next generation console. The answer is no. Obviously, the answer is no, but I guess we have to explain this to a lot of people that don't understand how games are actually made and scale, etc. Blah blah blah. We've also got some other information regarding the system. It should be pretty interesting. Let me know your thoughts down below as we go, and hit that like button. Maybe show a friend if you happen to like the content. Subscribe for more. Let's get into it. Now, we've got several good topics in this video, including one where a developer shuts down the ridiculous theory, that the Series S holds back next generation games. But we're going to start with a few other things, guys. Of course, let me know your thoughts as we get going. First up, Microsoft do confirm how backwards compatibility will work on Series S. They do say Xbox Series S and X will play thousands of games from 4 generations. In fact, they would do so day one. They say Xbox Series S will play the Xbox One S version of backwards compatible games. Now, I mentioned on Twitter that this is a possibility due to the lower physical RAM spec of Xbox Series S. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but they do say that Series S backwards compatible games will have improved texture filtering, much like the Xbox One X. They will also have higher and more consistent frame rates. Same goes for any kind of dynamic resolution. They will also have much faster load times and auto HDR support right from the system level function of the box itself for games that do support it. Now, the reason I said this was a possibility on Twitter was the fact that Xbox One X enhanced titles are enhanced for 9 physical gigs of RAM. Remember, that's 12 gigs overall, 9 of that goes to the OS. Xbox Series S, when playing Xbox One X versions of backwards compatible games, would struggle thanks to their only 10 gigabytes of GDDR6, 7.5 of which is for games. Now, I think it's important to remind people that through velocity, yes, the architecture next generation games have to be built on. Mind you, for a reason. The games have to stream off of the internal SSD for a reason. There is a reason you have to play games there. There's a reason games have to be built through velocity to work as a next generation title, and it is to enable that 100 gigabytes of in-game assets and those memory multipliers enabled by the SSD and compression blocks in the CPU. Basically, next-gen Xbox games become next-gen when using this architecture and enable so much more capability. But unfortunately, old games do not have this in mind. They were not coded with velocity. This is the one drawback. Next-generation Xbox games effectively have access to far more memory assets than unpatched, unvelocity architecture-enabled games. This is why you can't play Xbox One X versions of games on your Xbox Series X, because those games are tuned for 9 physical gigs of game RAM, where Series S, if those games were enabled with the velocity architecture and retuned for the SSD, could easily play those games. Developers are not going to go back and do that, so you are just going to have the Xbox One S version of games enabled for you. These base versions of Xbox games were intended and developed to use way less physical RAM. Basically, you still get to own and keep your games, but since developers are not expected, and I do not blame them frankly, to go back and retune their games for velocity, for all those memory multipliers, to expand all that RAM usage and gain access to all that stuff, really, you're just going to be stuck with the older unpatched title. Again, do you care? What titles will it affect that you might care about? Let me know down below. I'm really not sure. Xbox Series X, by the way, will have full access to the Xbox One X version of those games if they are unpatched or otherwise, because it has more physical RAM. To be clear, Series S could run those games with the Xbox One X patch, but it gets its memory benefits a different way that requires some kind of optimization from developers through velocity architecture. Yes, it could easily run those patches, but the physical RAM requirement is too high. If optimized for velocity, for the memory multipliers, for the SSD, it could easily run those things, but unfortunately, developers' time is money. Stuff like that, you understand, I understand. That's exactly why you're not getting that stuff for all of the people asking me. Something else that's been confirmed by Xbox's Jason Ronald is the fact that the expansion cards for Series S and Series X are hot swappable, and you don't need to reboot your console to do so. So if you need to transfer some files or change what games you have on what drives, you don't have to worry about rebooting anything. Velocity velocity architecture will automatically sense, detect all of those files, and use them seamlessly. Very, very intelligent design there. They also did confirm that the Outer Worlds loading test, as I talked about in my last video, was not utilizing velocity architecture, meaning that the load times were not as fast as they could be. Very, very cool stuff. Microsoft are seemingly thinking of everything. Let me know your thoughts on that one down below as we move into a developer speaking on Xbox Series S, holding back next generation games. And while there have been several developers speak out about this and rant and rave about the Lockhart, as we told you they would complain about because it is less capable than the system they are also working on, the Xbox Series X, this does not mean that it will be held back, and many state as much in their own rant threads towards the end, of course. Well, none of this will matter anyway because it's going to be a PC, and for PC we built for minimum game design spec, blah blah blah. So I basically ranted for no reason whatsoever. That was fun. Long story short, I've been saying it forever because it's common sense. I've had developers on my channel saying it because it's common sense, but apparently some of these guys forget that when you build games for PC, the PC is the lowest common denominator, meaning your minimum requirement, your low-end spec, the least capable hardware the game will run on is actually the design spec for the title itself. One developer, when asked about the possibility of the Xbox Series S holding back the X or anything else, says the following: a 4 teraflop GCN GPU would not perform anywhere close to a 4 teraflop RDNA 2 GPU. I've actually covered this several times. It's just one aspect of what makes this 4 teraflop even faster than a 6 teraflop machine like Xbox One X. He continues by saying you can't just throw numbers together. When you add in all of the other areas that Series X actually has, such as sampler feedback I/O improvement, faster memory, ray tracing capability, the Xbox Series S actually eats the 6 teraflop Xbox One X alive. He then goes into talk about memory usage even without all of the velocity architecture and the sampler feedback, etc., while targeting 1440p as the box is designed to do. 4 to 8 gigabytes of VRAM will be consumed, which he says the box can handle. He says it really is no contest. Now, this developer, like myself, as I've said in recent videos, expects to see mini games at 1080p higher frame rates with better visuals. The reason Xbox One X didn't do that is because the CPU bottleneck prevented the extra frames from being handed out, thus they could not double the frame rate up to 60. They would then have to half the resolution at that frame rate. Xbox One X would keep things at 30 many times and raise that resolution, maxing out that GPU potential. Now, Stevens does talk about ray tracing on the lower end system and kind of confirms what I was saying in my last video. Series S may be less capable with ray tracing due to its fewer CUs, but developers will work around that. Something else that I want to point out is many developers are not considering velocity architecture. Yes, the fact that you actually have to build games on next generation Xboxes for velocity architecture, the game has to then run off of the SSD inside the box for a reason, and that reason is I/O throughput. The ability to use the SSD inside the box as essentially some kind of memory expander. When you utilize the SSD in the box in conjunction with the compression blocks in the CPU, you then speed that drive up, enabling it to supply 100 gigabytes of in-game assets almost instantaneously off of the SSD. This has memory multiplier effects, as Microsoft has already confirmed, meaning your 7+ gigabytes of RAM available for Series S games, which is far higher than the minimum spec on PC today, by the way. You know, the games will be built for that spec, remember? Add to that technologies like sampler feedback that will actually reduce texture usage overall. Add to that the developers will be targeting 1080p and 1440p on this box, meaning developers will be using far less RAM for the screen buffer itself. In fact, with all of this at play, not only will Series S easily be able to handle the spec requirements of today's games, but the games of the future as well. Anybody who says this box will hold back next generation games, honestly, are they not talking about the fact that these games are going to PC? Are they not talking about that minimum spec being a 4 gigabyte card or even less in some cases? Are they not talking about velocity and how that 7+ gigabytes of RAM essentially gets multiplied through the SSD and that acceleration process of those assets? Are they not talking about sampler feedback? Are they not talking about basically anything to do with velocity architecture? If they're not, then they are not including the whole discussion. And again, 7+ gigabytes of assets in the RAM, that is more than enough for 1080p and 1440p without any of those things at all added to that. So I think it's a silly discussion. I was told personally in a direct message, and I am recording this, a few days before I'm going to release this video, but I was told in a personal direct message from a member of the hardware team that they are going to actually shut this down by talking about this more. They're going to show you more on why you can expect these games to run and perform great and not hold anything back. Just something to keep in mind when you see people spouting off about this when they don't actually know anything about it. But hey, again, let me know your thoughts on all of today's topics. Instead of breaking this down into 3 separate videos, I figured I would make it worth your time, stick all of this stuff together, explain a lot of it because I get so many DMs about this stuff, and of course incorporate all sources on screen linked down below in the description so you guys can check it out yourselves. I'd like to know your thoughts. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, maybe show a buddy or two, and of course help spread the word about the channel. Subscribe, bell button, all of that good stuff. Patrons, thank you so much for what you do. Channel members, thank you so much for what you do. If you want to become a patron, there's a link down below. If you want to become a channel member, there's a join button next to the subscribe button. We've got new merchandise coming soon, etc. So keep that in mind. I will let you guys know when that stuff is finally finished. And shout out to Sean LeBrie for working his butt off on it. I've had a pretty rough weekend. A lot of times I kind of put on this kind of, announcer kind of persona thingy that really is me, but amplified, to kind of present information in a more in tune, energy amped up way. But honestly, behind the scenes, man, my cat just died. Really, really sucks. It's been a lot to deal with, if I'm honest. That sucks. So again, let me know if your cat has died any time in your life and how badly that may or may not have sucked for you. For me, it really did suck, and I'm trying to adjust to this. And first pet that has done this. So I don't know. Hey, there's a little bit of personal information for you guys. Again, let me know yours. Don't put your social security. No, don't do none of that. I know one of you's gonna do it. Don't do that. Okay. To those that watched the video at this point, thank you so much. You guys rock. Follow me on Twitter at dealer_gaming. Follow me on Xbox Live, II space dealer space II, and I will see you guys in the next one.